With today's video, we are going to extend Batman's Rogues Gallery with none other than Harley Quinn. This model was sculpted by Patricio Duva, link in the description, and comes in 17 parts, and this is what it looks like after printing and gluing most of the body parts together. Since I was one of the first who received the file, there was a female key missing in the mallet, so I had to drill a hole into it so that the male key on her boot fits into the mallet. I also separated the handle before printing and put a hole through it with mesh mixer to then stick a brass pin into it for more stability. And these are the parts we are going to paint now. The first step was I sprayed a few layers of gloss varnish over the base that I later want to light up. Then I used Escorpena green for the high spots and Goblin green for the low spots and painted the inside of the liquid. To create a rust effect, similar to what I did with my 6-scale Dark Knight Batman, I used Charred Brown, Parasite Brown and Dark Flesh Tone and randomly dabbed my paintbrush on the base. With gunmetal I wanted to add a bit of metallic look that shines through the weathered yellow tank paint. Then I went back and forth, well, actually only forth and not back because that doesn't really work, and gradually applied more and more rust to the base. I also applied the same technique for those pipes. Base coated them with Dark Flesh Tone, dabbed Parasite Brown and Charred Brown onto it, with a little bit of gunmetal for the edges as a final touch, and done. Here you can see the difference between Dark Flesh Tone on the left and added Parasite Brown on the right. And this is after adding Charred Brown. And the final comparison with gunmetal on the left. And with that we can put the base to the side and try to recreate a nice wood effect for Harley's mallet. For that I base coated the whole mallet with mahogany. Then I used light brown to lighten up the tree rings and slightly misted the rest of the mallet as well. Then I went in with burnt umber and after that with middle stone. But please don't ask me why, I do not really have a plan or know if it's going to work in the moment I do it. But in general you can say the more layers you apply, the more realistic or more detailed it will look in the end. Then I used the paintbrush with the same color, middle stone, to paint some of the cracks and grains. And then I went back in with light brown. Don't worry, you're not trapped in a loop here, we're almost done. I also used a dry brush to imitate some wood fiber. And then the next color I used for dry brushing was earth, as the light brown came out a little too harsh, if that makes sense. Finally, I used another layer of burnt umber, but this time watered down as a wash. For the rope that connects the hammer's head with the handle, at least I thought that's what it is, I started with leather brown, followed by dry brushing bone white. Then I jumped over to the middle part of the handle and painted that black as a base coat for gunmetal. And I did the same with those straps that hold together the hammer's head. Afterwards I mixed burnt umber with water again and weathered the rope. Next I masked off the wood part to airbrush the metal parts with chainmail silver. And then I thought, why not risk messing up all of those layers of wood painting you have done and try to paint a smiley face on one side of the mallet and your face here on the other side. Then I went over to her grenade launcher, which I just base coated with black and then dry brushed with gunmetal. And with that we can jump over to Harley herself, where I started with a mix of pale flesh and a little bit of mud brown for her skin. Then I used blue, yellow and red washes to tint the flesh tone and give it more realism. Next I lightly airbrushed pale flesh, but only from the top to imitate highlights. For her corset and boots I chose gory red. And for her pants and those thingies on her arm, regular red. Her corset was supposed to look more like leather, so I mixed mahogany with red as a second layer. For the rest of her boots I mixed black with light grey and plain black for the other half of her pants and for that other arm thingy. And then I mixed another slightly brighter batch of grey for her belt. And an even lighter grey for the upper part of her corset. For her panties and her bra I used bloody red. And then I went back to the upper part of her corset for another layer of grey to clean up the imperfect black lines and the first layer of grey that didn't have a good coverage. For all the metal parts on her body I used gunmetal. Next I went back to her underwear with gory red. And then I jumped over to her head and started the hair with bone white. And ghost grey for her eye. Afterwards I mixed another batch of mud brown and pale flesh because I had a bit of overspray to fix. Then I mixed pale flesh with white for her face to give her the whiteness that Harley needs. With black pastel, I painted eyeshadows over and under her eyes. After I was done with that, I went back in with Ghost Gray, which I also used for the teeth, but then I switched to Bone White for the teeth. And then I tried something new for painting the tongue. I didn't use acrylic paint for that, but red pastel color, which actually gives a pretty realistic look that is not too harsh. Then I put on my magnifying glasses to paint the eyebrows and her hair, where I wanted to paint individual hair strands. With black, I painted her eye makeup. And for the lipstick imitation, I used Gory Red. Then I grabbed my eye decals that you can also get on my Etsy shop, punched one out, dissolved it in water and put it onto the eye. For her pigtails and strands, I used middle stone on the underside to create a shadow effect. Lastly, with red and black, I airbrushed the tips of her pigtails, then I glued them on with super glue. A tiny amount of gloss varnish for the pupil and the mouth and lips, and lastly gluing on the strands, and then that was it. Then I put the acrylics to the side and used oil paints for weathering. First of all, I used my black oil wash and panel line mix that I showed you how to mix in the previous Wonder Woman video. With this black wash I went over the entire base and the mallet. And with burnt umber I created a little bit of rust effect on the handle. Where the black wash also comes in handy is at those very tiny details and lines, way easier than with acrylics in my opinion. With a Q-tip soaked with white spirit you can simply remove all of the unwanted oil paint. Then I glued everything together with 5-minute epoxy, which is way more durable than super glue. As a final step for the mallet, I varnished it with Vallejo satin varnish. And then I went back to the base with green oil paint to make the tank all nasty. I dipped the brush into the white spirit and then into the green and onto the base with it. And then I thought, okay, you're putting LEDs in the base, but in reality the only time you switch it on is for the final reveal of the video. So let's also make it look good when the lights are turned off. So we are taking the risk a second time to mess up the mallet and try to do object source lighting, which is a technique where you try to recreate a light source, in this case the liquid that shines its color onto the mallet. The very last step for Harley was to weather her boots with Beastie Brown and Earth. Then I glued a LED light strip in the base and called it good.